Well, welcome to Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. I'm your host. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest who's led the charge in defense, innovation, and training throughout his 30-plus year military career. So whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to innovative leaders and thinkers shaping the future of national security, defense, and technology. And today, we're thrilled to welcome Scottie Moore, a project consultant, strategy guru, and training expert who has dedicated his life to serving our nation, both as a military officer and as an organizational consultant. Scottie has over 30 years experience serving in the U.S. Army. Notable assignments include Director of Training at the National Guard Bureau and Chief of Staff of U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, TRADOC. Scottie was directly responsible for the training, resourcing, and readiness posture of over 300,000 soldiers and managed over $3 billion in annual resources for training engagements. Scottie is who I reach out to when I have a really complex defense-related question, and he can break it down into real-world concepts. He has a remarkable ability to synthesize a lot of information in uncertain environments and really make accurate projections about how it's going to impact people. So the other thing I love about Scottie is he is also a fellow Mississippian like myself. My spouse actually served under Scottie back in the Mississippi National Guard, and he became a family friend who was a huge encouragement to us as we started our business. So that's who Scottie Moore is, and I am excited to introduce him to you guys. So Scottie, thank you for being on Tipping Spears.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you.
So can you tell us kind of where the Scottie Moore story begins? So where are you from? You know, where were you raised, and how did that experience impact who you are today?
Well, really, my story is continuing because I started out. I grew up in rural Mississippi. One of the first college graduates in my family. Most everybody had been in the military, so I needed to go to college. So I kind of followed that path, and had a great run. As a guardsman in Mississippi, taught high school for a while after college. But really that's where my roots are, seventh generation Mississippian. I say I'm an expat living in Northeast Alabama, between Huntsville and Chattanooga, here up on top of a mountain, I guess where I can do some thinking, but that's kind of who I am. I've got a couple of, I don't have teenage sons anymore, but my oldest is in the Mississippi Guard, doing great things. And really that's one of the things that kind of keeps my, nose under the military rug, and being able to listen to what he says. And then my youngest is just living the life and playing high school football, and, it's got everybody being jealous of him. So, but no, it's pretty good. And I have a lot of time to think about things. I do a little bit of writing, reading that I've always wanted to do, and really trying to get back. And I'll talk a little bit in a minute. Kind of get back to some of my formative experiences. Both as a history major at Southern Miss back in the '90s, and what was going on then. Really to more contemporary things and concerns that we see today. So yeah, that's really me. And nothing remarkable. Plowed my way through War College and a tough job, back in 2017, and have I keep dabbling and keep trying to learn something new every day. Now that something new every day may be, how to build a stick chair. But I think it all really kind of goes together, because you have to have a little bit of creativity, floating around in your veins if you're going to be value added, both as a kind of a friend and helping look after people going through the transition, and doing some project consulting on the side, because you want to be, and I'll talk about value added in whatever you do, um, in a few minutes. But that's really me in a nutshell. This is a huge thing for me being able to do this. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, Scotty, can you tell us what sparked your interest in a military career and how that kind of all came about?
Wow, that's kind of of an evolutionary topic. I grew up kind of um, with a full range of people. There'll be a World War I veteran sitting in the barber shop, and everybody else is sitting there and they're a World War II veteran. So I was kind of one of those last generations to get to hear some really good um, firsthand war stories. And not only that, I mean, that generation had had heard from the Civil War veterans. So my grandfather, who I grew up, spending a good bit of time with, um, remembers the Civil War generations. I mean, because they were still around in the 20s and 30s. So that and the fact that Sherman's army came down the road that uh, you know old Jackson Road that when my mom and dad brought me home, that's where they brought me to, was that road. So I kind of grew up in the shadows of a lot of that. Um, and some of those experiences and things have evolved. I've kind of came to the belief that Grant was the greatest strategist of the
Mhm.
Civil War, and generationally. So those things evolve, and had some great teachers, growing up in a great school system. And I didn't make very good grades, um, but I can tell you I earned what I had. And I credit a lot of that to my English teachers. So quite honestly, I don't remember um in terms of how to write or the English language much in college. I had one or two here or there, but I had some high school English teachers who really, really held our feet to the fire, and it was pretty unpleasant at the time. But that's really formative. I think about that a lot every time I write, because now we've gotten ourselves into some very correct writing, that doesn't have much style to it. Whereas the the education I had, not only did it have to be correct, it had to have an element of style with it. Coming from Mississippi, from a tradition of, really good writing. I've been reading a little Eudora Welty here lately, and I'm like, oh, I gotta, get over there when the flowers bloom. I used to run by her house, literally on the run by her house about every morning when I was working in Jackson. So we don't realize at the time how where our intellectual curiosity will take us. And that's part of being able to not only ingest some things, but being able to share those, um, with the body at large, or with somebody you're trying to help solve a problem, or to frame a problem first and then solve it.
Ah, well, that's fascinating. So education and training have been kind of a theme throughout your career, even before the military, and then as you went into the military and kind of took those commands and roles. Is there anything specific that sparked your interest in training, or kind of having that as part of one of your in your
Well,
toolbox?
it was kind of a natural evolution. I knew I wanted to be a teacher at some point. I knew I wanted to teach when I was young. And then I got into teaching, and I got really hungry. So that my next love that was really overtaking my love for teaching. You were going in at 2 o'clock in the morning and getting in a Bradley simulator, conduct and fire trainer, and then going to teach high school. So I made some decisions, and went on orders full time. And then after September 11th, that really, um, kind of kind of sealed the deal there back in the early 2000s for me. And I knew that that was a pivotal time in the history of our country. So that, once again, I'm down that road and I'm in training. So I became, I kind of pitched my tent in the training camp and, did some platform instruction, um, you know, did a bunch of staff rides, and then really got into the developmental piece of it, dissecting the old ADDIE model or whatever with how we construct and design training in the Army. And on the surface, it makes pretty good sense. But if your instructor or if your small group instructor or whoever that might be is not any good, then your training is not going to be very good. So it all, if you don't have the human factors lined into it, and they don't have the right experiences to marry up with that, then that's the back to your training. So I talk a lot about that because I think that's the really what we do. And if we want, and new administration just came in, I'm super excited when any administration comes in. So I don't really do, public partisan politics, but I'm excited about a new administration coming in. And, we're looking at this strength posture. And I was around in the 80s and the Reagan defense buildup, and that was pretty exciting times. Or it was on the surface anyway, but there was a lot going on behind the scenes in the Army. We were just coming out of a very turbulent period. In the 70s, airland battle had just came on. We just had the big platforms with the Bradley and the Abrams tank, and Patriot missiles and all that sort of thing came around in the early 80s. So, we're kind of a new place, but we're really not. So I think a peace through strength is a good posture, but in order to take that peace through strength means you got to train a lot, and you have to train under difficult conditions. And our military is so blessed that we have our combat training centers at Fort Irwin and Fort Johnson that there's nothing in the world that can compare to it. And there's nothing else in the world that can compare to our military when everything's firing on all 8 cylinders or all 12 or ever how many cylinders we're firing on. So, but there's a lot of underpinnings of that. So that's the other thing I look at is, what are the joists holding up the floor here, to do peace through strength. And it really is, it's about training, and it's about posture, and it's about developing a generation of leaders. And we had that generation of leaders to do that, in the 80s, and we do now. We have a very, very good cadre of folks that paid some incredibly difficult bills early in their careers in terms of combat experience. But there's also, the institutional experience that maybe got rushed on that a little bit. And we've really got to come back to, getting into the problem solving processes and the collaboration, and the doctrinal underpinnings of everything that's made us a great military. So, and I don't look at everything just strictly through an Army lens anymore. People say things are strategic, and I'm like, no, that's really not strategic. The nuclear triad is strategic. Okay. So, I kind of, I'm a little bit pragmatic on that, I suppose. But just trying to get everybody to go the right direction. I know, Hannah, I went off my own direction there, but that's what I do. So I'm looking,
Great insight. Great insight, Scottie. There's always a lot of wisdom in your tangents.
I don't know.
So, so every career journey's, it's a journey. Some paths are more pleasant than others.
Oh,
Can you
absolutely.
tell us kind of, or give us some insight into, kind of an obstacle that you faced in your career, kind of how you overcame that, or something that was kind of a crossroads for you?
Wow. Well, I don't want to say that I've worked for some knuckleheads and that I had to figure out a way um, to work in, through, and around people. But that's really what it comes down to. You're going to have some challenges out there. You're gonna work for some people that you don't personally aspire to be like. And you're going to work for some people that maybe can't communicate to you clearly. And you're going to work with some people and for some people and around some people that just can't see the vision. Because part of being a really good leader is being able to um, lay out a vision. And I had a battalion commander, very, very young in my career, who could, you know, describe the quarter I'm holding in my hand, and we would talk about that. Okay, well, okay, Scottie, you've got to be descriptive, and your vision as a lieutenant about how this movement to contact is going to go down is important. So that's always a challenge, is that vision. And that's one of the things you got to work through. So you know challenge, hey, working with leaders, working with and I don't really like working around leaders. I would like working through, by, with, through whatever I have. So that is a challenge. It is a skill set all in itself, to be able to do that, and nobody having any kind of personal rub animosity, all that sort of business. So I say that that's something uh, that there's a lot of talk in the military now about mentorship,
Mhm.
and hopefully I can brush up on this here a little bit later. But mentorship has kind of become the thing, and that's good. And what that does is that may help you with those interpersonal skills that you need. So, lack of vision, lack of guidance, but that's part of it. You're expected to solve complex problems with little guidance and with sometimes of very little information. So, that's, maybe we can hit intuition a little bit. And that's where it goes back to. I hope you've kind of studied up on on how to do these sort of things. I hope you've studied up a little bit on the intelligence piece of this, and that you just don't have raw information, because raw information is not intelligence. So as many in the S2 community, um, we grapple about that a little bit. So um being able to solve those military problems. And the third thing I guess is difficult is you got to be able to identify the problem. You got to be able to get to the crux of what we're talking about. So that's always a challenge, because we're a little bit top heavy in the Army, in my opinion. We've got a little, maybe a little bit more at the top than we need. So sometimes, a staff can get bogged down, um, just because there's so much going on. So being able to see through that fog, I don't want to say the fog of war, but that's another piece of it that's a challenge. So, um, and all of these are things that can be overcome by just being a foundationally good leader, engaged leader. You don't have to be the smartest leader. You still got to work pretty hard, but it's about being engaged. It's about knowing your craft, and it's about knowing your people. So, and being able to form a team mutual trust, respect, clear communications, all those sort of things. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one of many, many challenges, without saying the tyranny of time is always there. And this myth of work-life balance. There is work. Maybe there is when you retire, you can have work-life balance. But when you're hooking and jabbing in uniform, um, doing the nation's work, sometimes one thing will overtake the other. It's your ability um, to pull that back steady is where it counts. So to pull it back to where it's supposed to be, to go, okay, I know I worked the last 5 weekends, doing this sort of thing. This is what we're going to do. They're family. So and part of that is communicating with your family or with your significant other, or if all you have is there's a dog there, and you've left your dog at home, you still got to communicate. So there's still got to be some expectations. So that's a difficult thing, because if you really want to have a good run, is what I call it in the military. If you want to, if you want those, key positions, if you want to advance and move on, you got to do the hard jobs. And they're jobs that are harder than others. And then there's some jobs that weren't hard until you got there. And I've landed there a couple of times. Like, you talk to the person you replace, oh, this was a great job. And then you get there and you get a whole, change. And it's like, you've never rode that hard in your life. So being able to adapt to that and not just, walking around feeling sorry for yourself. Well, the job was, wasn't hard until I got here. Well, maybe so. Maybe people knew that when you got there, they were already, the band was in the grandstand waiting on you to arrive, because they knew that you were gonna, take the field and go in for the big win. So don't don't get too wrapped up about that, because it's a hard business. And the taxpayers and the American people place an enormous amount of trust in very young people. If you don't think that, I mean, um, you just see a young man or woman walking in a Bucky's or something in uniform after drill, and how many people were going to come up and thank that young person for their service, and probably going to buy that barbecue sandwich for them, probably going to pay for it at the counter, and welcome somebody pay for my barbecue sandwich. Well, that's because the American people place an enormous amount of trust in this organization. And even as a retiree, I still count myself as a National Guardsman. And I wrote something the other day, and they said, "Well, why did you write that?" I wrote it because I'm a guardsman, and that's, that I didn't resign my commission. Um, and I still, I'm still thinking about that. So, I think about us, as a military and as a society at night, but also think about the bad guys out there as well. So you kind of have to balance the two, but it's an enormous responsibility, to do that. And the amount of trust that our nation places on us is enormous. And you gotta, it's sort of like you got to go out there and earn it. And I really believe that. So I'm not saying you got to work 15 hours a day pounding your head into a plate glass window, because I've done that, chasing around, you know, some useless, information point just because somebody wanted to know it. And that's another frustrating is spin, useless spin. Um, and we just, as a military, we just don't have time for that. And I've always done everything I could to kind of stamp that out. And I still do. I still send myself sometimes on excursions, and I got to go, why do I care about that? Stop it. So this quest for a useless data point, you
No, that's insightful, Scotty. So your career, you take on challenges, usually in very high stress situations, not immediate payout, not immediate resolution, and you kind of see it through. So can you give us some insights, given that kind of, and then even in retirement, still embodying this like continuing a life of service, kind of never stop serving mentality. So how do you manage stress or discouragement in these environments? Is there any, kind of source of inspiration for you, or any kind of the way that you kind of manage yourself as you're taking on these big challenges that may not, bring work-life balance, or, may
know.
not all feel good?
Yeah. So here's a word about time. Time is it's our most valuable thing that we have, and you always have less time than you think you do. So your time in reality is not what you think. So the first thing um, that in any challenge like that is ask the right questions. You know, be intuitive, but not so intuitive that you end up not solving whatever you're working on, because you have limited time. So the other part of that, and I'll put a couple of plugs in for retirement here. Your most valuable thing that you have um, in leaving the military and going into industry, or back into even back into work for the government, or into a nonprofit, is believe it, is your network. And maybe network is not a good word, but it's your group of people and organizations that and that you have some sort of regular connectivity with. Okay, rather than just saying the blanket term network, is a group of people, organizations, institutions that you have regular, close connections with, and it's a two-way street. So that's very, very important, because what you want when you transition from the military is you want options. That is, nobody told me that in TAP. Nobody told me that. Well, they didn't tell me much when I left, but because everybody thinks that they're going to have a giant parade for you when you hang up your uniform. Well, maybe they will if you opt in the retirement ceremony at Fort Myer. They'll give you a parade, but that parade will, once you exit the stage, will be over, and you will have a group of people, institutions, organizations that and you have connectivity with. And what you really want is you want options. So you want to be able to do different things, but you don't really know what your skill set is. Having been an infantry officer for many, many years, and dabbled in the programmatics of military and defense financial management, force management, and those sort of things, but you're still primarily, as they call it in the business world. See, the business world, they have, are you an ops guy?
Mhm.
Well, I guess I am sort of an ops guy. So and that actually came from the business world. So it's about options, and the other piece to that is retirement transition. And I've got off subject a little bit. Don't wait until you're thirsty to drill a well. So don't wait until 6 months before you're hanging up your uniform to drill a well, because at that point you will find yourself very thirsty very quick. So that's sort of some background on that with options and with time. And what helped me through this last process, and that last process, that last big muscle move, was retirement. Prior to that, it was these big, sort of positions that I was fortunate enough to have. I think at the right time in my career that I could actually really reach down and grow some future leaders, maybe do a little bit of good for the organization and for national defense, but also have enough maturity to reflect that there was some failures that I had. So, ego is a killer. It's a killer on the battlefield. It's a killer in the business world. It's in the military. So you got to check that in and go, wow, this is the things that I came up a little bit short on. I really been spending some time on that uh lately with innovation, and I was going to innovate. I was going to come up with a new digital watch or something like that. So that's sort of some challenges, and the way that I worked through that, recognizing those things, recognizing where I was at in transition from the military to do a little bit more robust planning and about time management and being able to manage that time. Because if you can get your time under control, it helps you a little bit with the anxiety and some of those other things. That and I still get up every day, and I don't run on pavement for several miles, but I still get up and I move the machine, feed the machine, and rest the machine. So we still do those things that are kind of wired into me. Hence hence why I'm still a little bit cold this morning, but I think that's part of it, is continuing to take care of yourself physically. It's like we were talking about earlier. If you use the VA system, just make the VA do what they're supposed to do. It's your VA. It's not the VA's VA. I don't know who else it belongs to other than us. So it belongs to the veterans. So make the VA do what they're supposed to do. And I've had a great experience, and they've headed off some medical problems that could have went really, really south. But it was all just a little bit of diligence, takes a little more time, and all that. So those are some things that, taking care of the physical wellness, been able to explore my spirituality a little bit more, become a little bit deepened in faith, read some religious books, in with this other stack of books over here that are not read. And some are half read, but I'll try to get to that in a minute. So those are the things: your intellectual growth, your time management, your group of people that you find value in and they find value in you, and keeping that moving is very, very important.
Oh, those are great insider tips.
Scattered, I know.
They're very
Scattered.
helpful. For the listeners, give you a little bit of background. Scottie is the example that I use for stellar military retirement transition, because before you even retired, Scottie, I remember you were networking. We were at AUSA, and you had cards. You already had cards already printed up. I think you were still in uniform, or not in uniform, but you were in the retirement
Yep.
process, and you were working it. You were preparing to transition. And then you're so proactive about keeping up, not just like network as in like a Rolodex of contacts you collect, but relationships that you invest in, and you're very proactive about that. And I think it makes a world of difference.
And Hannah, that's a great word we use. And like I said, I'm trying to push network out the door. I'm trying to push net because it's a cold word.
It
It's
is.
about relationships, because there's not a lot of I don't keep up with people that I generally don't like, or that we can't have a conversation about. It can be about work. It can be
Yeah.
about the work we're doing. but that's the benefit of it, is that relationships are key. And that's, a lot of people transition and they get isolated
Yeah.
and they become very nervous.
Yeah.
So relationships are huge, both both in a professional sense and in a personal sense, but most of the time they all kind of run together, because you end up talking a lot of shop, which is okay, because if you're a practitioner, you're a practitioner, and I'm not gonna wake up one day and go back there and start, sawing something out of wood and become this great craftsman. I may, but um, it's it's tough. So yeah.
Well, looking back kind of across your career journey, is there anything that stands out as kind of one of the most rewarding experiences, or something that now that you're in this kind of season in life that you reflect on?
Yeah. And this is a pretty short answer, is being able to work with phenomenal young leaders at at towards the end of my career, and and I never got as much. Most of this was due to COVID, that I couldn't get everybody around me that I needed to get around me, that I could really go, hey, read this book. Hey, uh, you know, that bring a paper in. And I really like written uh documents written in plain English. I've been reading a lot of things that national security documents from the 80s. And they were written in such plain language. you know, Tell the president that he really ought to think about this. And now, this some of this writing we've done is so dry, um, that I wish I would have had more time, because I graded a lot of papers. I mean, I had a bag of red pens on my desk, both at the really '04, '05, '06 level, and I had a lot of red ink on papers that I wrote. So it goes both ways. Um, but I wish, I say I wish, more time, and I had a great experience, but it could have been, you know, if I would have had more time to really do that, because that was the most rewarding, uh, and getting to see the other end of that now. So that was my innovation. My innovation was not the system that I was able to implement to, make something akin to TurboTax, but really what I was able to do on some level is to take a group of young leaders and equip them with communicative skills, with a comfort of, um, being able to conduct briefings at a very high level, because I took no joy in going in and briefing a bunch of senior leaders. It just didn't. But what I really found rewarding was, hey, you're briefing this tomorrow to this group of senior leaders, and watching, the young officers' eyes light up and saying, "Do what?" Um, No, you're gonna go work on, what we're gonna say, and then you're gonna come back in here. We're gonna go through it, and I'm gonna be sitting behind you and all that. That was the best. Um, that was the absolute best, and seeing them hit it over the park. Um, and then, well, why didn't you brief Scotty? And I'm like, man, I didn't have to. I spent 2 hours yesterday working on this. So that's the most, that's leader development, or that's a piece of it. It's also leadership. It's that fourth or fifth thing that we do. We're developing the next generation of leaders behind you. So it's leader development. That's one of the five things you do as a leader. And it's beyond their institutional experience. It's all that. So And being able to formalize that in a program, I think it's super important as well, because when you have a program, that means that time and resources are allocated against it. Otherwise, excuse me, it's an idea. It's a leader development idea, because anything that's unresourced in terms of time and resources is an idea. It's not a program. It's not a business practice. You know, if you're in the civilian market and a company says, well, this is what we do for safety, you know, we've got a safety idea, because they haven't dedicated time to train their employees. They haven't dedicated professional safety advisors to conduct that training, and they haven't documented that training, so they have no appropriate record for it. Of course, they will, you know, discover this maybe in a lawsuit somewhere down the road, but those programs, you have to resource them, and they, that's tough to do sometimes, but that's, you know, experience equals insight, and you can't make insight. You can't make it overnight. You can't train insight. You can't, it's just tough to do. It's different lenses over different times. So, and it's insight. It's a lot. So that ability, I call insight sometimes, and we were back to the most rewarding thing I did. Great young leaders, or great leaders, see the dead. They can see through the fog, and they can see the dead. And that's hugely important. Okay. That's an insight. That is an intuition, because they know themselves. They know the terrain they're on. They know the people they have on their team, and they know what risks and adversarial actions are against them. And they've measured that all at once. I call it seeing the dead. Some people can do it and some people can't. So,
Yeah, well, one thing I love about your approach, Scotty, is you're able, so in my world, I tend to find two groups of people. They're people or they're data people. And one thing that's so unique about you is that you're able to engage in the data, the information rich, the technology world, and still see people and how it impacts people. You know, there's like this old country music song, Here in the Real World. It's
yeah,
like, it's
I'm
like,
familiar.
you're able to see both sides. There's not a lot of folks out there that can go in between, being people person into,
Yeah.
the technical world. And that's one thing I've always really admired about you. I know over the past few years, you've been really plugged in to recent developments on technology. So all the hot new topics. So AI, innovation, narrative intelligence. You've been tracking this, you've been going places, really investing in learning about this stuff. Can you give us some insight into what new technology
Yeah.
excites you or scares you, or
Yeah.
we should
So
all
I'll
be
tell you,
scared
I'll tell you a little bit of both. And I know I have to tell you what keeps me up at night.
of it?
There's kind of three things here that, so most of my intellectual and academic pursuits have been purely non-monetized. So I'm learning how to operate in this. I'm giving you some buzzwords here. Monetizing your pursuits, or operating in an ecosystem. And I'm like, man, an ecosystem, is that like, something you put a chia pet inside, So they're really, if you look at this, and I grew up prior to the cell phone, um, prior to a lot of the intelligence gathering mechanisms that we have going on, prior to us being a connected world. I grew up in an era of long distance analog phone calls. So I'm an analog leader attempting to swim in a digital, and we're very much on the cusp of a hypercomputed world. And how hypercomputers are going to inject themselves into the cyber domain that's about as deep as I can get into that, because it's about as deep as I know. But I know that there's some things afoot going on with that. So there's three things really that I wrap and that's it's artificial intelligence. It has the potential to be a game changer on many, many different fronts, in terms of where we're at, in the medical community with medical research, certainly with where we're at in the defense sector. If you look at, utilizing these models, this computational technology and information warfare into our planning processes, and really what it's already able to do in terms of logistics. And that's what's really, really exciting, is the engineering and logistics that we've been able to unharness to solve military problems. Now, that's also, if we're solving them, certainly our adversaries are as well. So, keeping a technological step, and that's tough to do. Doing some business work now, it's, our, meeting with a company the other day, and we're talking about product development and how to outpace other foreign entities in developing a product. So that's very, very exciting. And I spent a lot of time on artificial intelligence in education. So that's pretty exciting to me. I mean, to be able to have that kind of access to that kind of information. But now there's some hallucination, there's some LSD in this system too, where it is not perfect. And so how that data is governed, how the entire system, the ecosystem of artificial intelligence, the governance behind that is going to be huge. And I know that the states are, they're all passing legislation or what have you with that. And then there's going to be a lot of national things that are going on with that. So we're kind of on the cusp of that. Next thing's probably, unmanned aerial systems and counter unmanned aerial systems.
Mhm.
And there is no one-stop shop for countering UAS. So maybe there is, and maybe some defense prime has came out with that. There's a great forum going on in Oklahoma today on counter UAS, but I don't think so. It's a game changer. It could be akin to the machine gun, in World War I, or the longbow, in Europe, or the breech loading rifle. It's another one of those things. So I think it's going to take us a while with UAS and counter UAS. There's going to be a lot of spiral developments out of that. And I grew up in the IED generation,
Mhm.
and we spent billions and billions of dollars, and we lost some great Americans to IEDs, and we got knocked into reacting to that problem set. Literally, we got punched into being able to counter that threat. But this is another, and everybody's kind of watching what's going on in Ukraine, and Ukraine is concerning, because I really think we're at some level of a world war with the events in Ukraine and the events in Gaza, events going on, and always got a lot shaking in the Middle East, Horn of Africa, maritime disruption. So we have a lot going on, and I'll tell you, a lot of these places, these unmanned aerial systems are floating around at the crux of it. So very, very concerned about that. I haven't seen the magic solution to any of that, but very, very interested in it. Been to some forums, and we still need good operators who understand how the enemy thinks, and when the enemy, puts these things into motion. So, There's not the technical solution is there, but you still have to have thinking war fighters on the other end of this. And then the other thing I think a lot about is power. I think about power in terms of powering our domestic data centers, which the United States is the world lead on right now. And I think about how to power up all this stuff in a brigade operations center deployed in the field. We think about domestic power. Got a note from TVA yesterday morning. Hey, everybody, try not to use so much power during the 3 hours. Well, you sent this message last year. You probably sent it the year before. What are you doing about it? So I'm pretty big on nuclear power, both in terms of building a plant, and really with the micro reactors too. If we could bring the level of safety and discipline, that the United States Navy has bought with smaller reactors, the past 70 years, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential there. But the reason that we've had so much success with our nuclear powered carriers and submarines is the discipline and the adherence to standards that they have really pursued, since the time that Admiral Rickover really kicked this thing over. So after World War II. So that's what it takes to deal with those systems. It's discipline, adherence to standards, and a continuing level of research, out of places, out of Idaho, out of New Mexico, out of these national labs that we have. So it's the research piece of it, because they're always trying to figure out how to do, power safely. And then it's the standards of discipline and surety that we're really that we're the best in the world at, being able to power these systems. And that's all the way from a reactor down to a more efficient battery that, we've got to keep the defense industrial base working on, and that we've got to keep getting these materials to do. So three big things, I think three big terms in national security are right there. And most of these are kind of system based, but they're not. All have an operational nexus to them that you need thinkers and doers to come together on. You need ballerinas and mathematicians. So that can operationalize this thing and figure out the math behind it. So, that's part of this, frame the problem kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah. As far as kind of what career advice do you have for the next generation of professionals interested in military or national security? What words of wisdom would you would you leave them with?
If you want the answer to a new problem, read an old book. Okay. And I know a lot of people that's cliche. A lot of people have used that. But understanding that, and understanding how to find the best of breed in whatever you're looking for to be able to solve the problem. So become a problem solver, and, figure out a group of people, be able to communicate, work a lot on communication. So both written communication and your ability to get up and, talk about whatever the subject may be. And that subject may not be something particularly interesting, but you have to be a transformational leader and not a transactional leader.
I
Okay.
like that.
I'm going to, I'm going to stand up here and talk about, I don't know, a toilet. And I'm just going to regurgitate the technical specifications of this toilet. No, we're going to be a transactional, a transformational leader, excuse me. And we're going to transform of why this thing is so important, why this is, why we've got to do this, why we got to make more of these, um, and have a little bit of enthusiasm with that. So, I talk a lot about that. Don't just be nobody. We can do transactional with AI. If you just
Mhm.
want a regurgitation of data points and some rote planning, and the artificial intelligence will never replicate the creativity, the spontaneity of the human mind. The other challenge that is getting it out and finding those people, finding the best of breed, in terms of things to read, in terms of things to, really transform me, find that. And all that's gonna, it's just gonna build that insight, So it's a lot of things. And terminology means a lot. I'm getting ready to, I got some work kind of in the that I'm looking at. And really it's a lot of discussion in the military about readiness. Well, somebody tell me what readiness is. Um, no, that's sort of a big cloudy thing that's got a whole bunch of components in it. I think more about lethality as a taxpayer. I want to know that our military can show, the strength that builds to the peace. And we do that with lethality, demonstrated lethality. How much, live fire we can conduct at night, and our communications work even after they're compromised. So one thing back to being, don't be scared of being an analog guy in a digital generation, because your comms are going to get cut off and you got to be able to communicate. And that may be with a big piece of cardboard on the floor of the desert somewhere. Uh, so you still have to be able to do that in a compromised environment. That thing called acetate, and our ability to dream on acetate, as um, you know, I was had put on me, is hugely important. So creativity. And we cannot, that's the one thing that our adversaries can't cap, is the ability to be creative leaders under the most difficult circumstances possible. And you can't get that if you're transactional. You can't get that kind of creativity. And if you're frustrated uh, with your hires because they're putting the manhole cover on the creativity, well, you're not going to grow. Okay. You only grow if sometimes you're going to fail a little bit. So, the discussion about lethality and the clarity that provides is pretty doggone important. So, yeah, that's, that and this, defense industrial base, um, kind of going forward, we really got to do some more thinking about that, and not just in a grand term, but we've got to think about a workforce behind that. Young people that we're training to build ships or whatever. And so I'm thinking downstream of it a little bit. They're thinking in Congress about, you know, big things in their district and big primes building this in their district. But I'm thinking about, hey, where are we going to get the young people to work these places? So that's part of some transformational thinking. So, and that's really what I've done. I try to, whenever I do work for anyone that I do work for, um, nobody would hire me because of what I've done or whatever, and I'm not, you know, I try to be value added and produce a product, and not just sit somewhere and ramble, like a lot of consultants do. That, hey, and if I can't solve your problem, maybe we just say, hey, I can't solve your problem. You know, maybe you go to the, next contestant, that maybe they can get the prices right. But, so that's part of it too, is that, I don't want to say intellectual honesty,
Mhm.
but knowing kind of your threshold. So that's that's kind of what I was thinking about in terms of that. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
It does. I love your point about being kind of value added. And as you were talking, I was thinking, being able to be someone that adds value is kind of a values thing on your
Yeah.
own part, right? Like, I mean, that is part of integrity. That is part of, character
Yeah.
and kind of the ethics that you hold yourself to, as
Right.
opposed to, like you said, the consultants that just, I mean, we see them all the time up around DC. They just want butts and seats job. They're just going to run their mouth and not do anything and charge you out the wazoo per
Right.
hour. And they're okay with that. Somehow they can sleep at night doing that. I don't know how, but
Yeah.
it doesn't bother them. And I
It
really,
actually, it actually still to this day, when I'm working on a little project and I can't get quite to there. I'm just sitting there scratching on paper about how to do it. And I'm like, oh, I'm having a flashback from solving a complicated military problem. And it's about providing options.
Mhm,
Everybody wants options. Everybody wants, option A, option B, which one is less optimal, more
mhm,
optimal, which one costs the most, costs the least. And then you do your risk calculus.
mhm,
That's where you go, okay, well, wow, I'm risking, $120,000 if we change this process, you know, that may not move the needle. So
mhm,
that's part of risk. That's, identifying risk, managing it, mitigating it, getting out in front of it a little bit. And that's one of those five things that leaders do. They accept, manage, and mitigate risk. And as leaders, you are inclined to provide some level of top cover. So as a transformational leader, that is in your charter to provide top cover. So yeah, I think about that a lot.
Are there any resources or, books, videos, anything uh, that you found particularly useful in your own kind of career journey and development that you would recommend to folks that were interested in kind of honing their skills?
So, and I would have to hold you up a stack of books, and I'd have to shuffle around to do that. But what I would tell you is, don't stovepipe. I tell everybody, read. I
Mhm.
mean, I've been a good reader since I was in the first grade, always. Now, it may not have been exactly what I was supposed to be reading for school, but I was reading something, you
Mhm.
know. So I would tell you, broaden the reading list to the greatest degree possible. And I still have to lean on myself to do this, because I will go into, I went into McKay's the other day, the big book exchange store or whatever, and I found myself over there at the military section going, oh, that'd be really cool, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, okay, stop, go back over there, you know, and look at self-help or whatever. And I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do self-help. Um, but so broaden your reading list. Make a
Mhm.
reading list and broaden it. I've been reading a lot Cherno's book on Grant,
Mhm.
because I've become very interested in the application of strategy and Grant and Vicksburg, and how that came to be as one of the great strategists of our time. And the U.S. Grant Libraries at Mississippi State University. It's a huge thing. So you go from that, and then you start, your hobby, reading on, am I building birdhouses today? You know, but no, read a great book by Juliet Funt that I've been recommending on managing your white space. You know, it's called a minute to think. So
Oh.
I just had that handy because it was another failure that I had in uniform is I could not manage my white space. So I go back and I reflect on that, you know, and I've got a book on, you know, be data literate. So, and that's the book that they were using at West Point to teach the data literacy class last summer. So there's a lot going on with how we use data now and data analytics and how we portray it and how we view it. And hopefully, you know, one day PowerPoint really will die and we will get back to communicating via written notes, written, you know. So this is, you know, what Brent Scrowcroft wants to tell the president, you know, and it's in
Mhm.
this, wow, this, you know, memo that sounds like a human wrote it, not that, you know, some AI algorithm generated this information paper on why we didn't have enough school seats last year that everybody already knows. So broaden your reading list, read a lot, and then write things down. And you may not get a chance to write and expound that
Mhm.
thought at the time, but write down what your thesis is. Write your, you know, write your outline. Maybe you can come back later and tell the story. But what that will help you do is that will help you professionally be able to communicate better in terms of an idea or a thing that you're trying to do. But it'll also help you back with problem solving as well. So, you know, make an outline. And I did that a lot. I bought a lot of books um, earlier that I said I'm going to read when I retire, but I hadn't done that yet. I'm just getting it. What happens is new books come out. So that keeps piling onto your reading list. So, but it's got to be very, very broad. I would just tell you, or you'll just end up, you know, you're going into Barnes and Noble and you immediately go to some new book on Clausewitz or something. I'm like,
Mhm.
come on, we've beat Clausewitz to death. So you got to get out of your comfort zone. I would say that. And that's the same thing with going to hear speakers. When you get
Mhm.
a chance to hear speakers, go listen to people outside of your comfort zone and visit places um, that maybe aren't necessarily part of a staff ride. So
Yeah.
it can be anything from a, you know, a visit to Muscle Shoals Sound Studio, you know, where Leonard Skinner and Aretha Franklin
Mhm.
body recorded, um, you know, all the way to, hey, I want to go tour a nuclear plant, or I don't know. But I would just say be very broad with that as well with the places you go. So
Yeah.
I know that's not very concrete advice other than, you know, have options, you know, and that. But I would tell you that I think it just you got to broaden your horizons. You'll broaden your perspective, and you will become more agile. You will become a more agile thinker.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. You'll see more opportunities that way too. You know,
Yeah.
things that if you're anything you know, I tend to get lost in my little silo
Yeah.
and where I can't see the forest for the trees. And as you were talking about the places you're going and even in the bookstore going to a different section than what you may
Oh yeah.
gravitate towards, it's like, you
Yeah.
know, we just
It can get pretty strange sometimes. It can get pretty strange. Uh, you know, personally sometimes it's just, you know, just go peruse it because, you know, I don't want to say I'm a bookworm, but I am a little bit. Um, but you know, everybody has their things, whether it's books or whether it's the arts,
Mhm.
uh, music
Mhm.
or whatever. I think they all, it's about that whole person
Yeah.
concept. And I think that's, what we look for success in successful in business is the same way. It's a rounded, um,
Mhm.
it's a rounded persona
Mhm.
that, and I've been obviously studying in the business world a little bit. And it's different. It's different from even the defense industrial complex out there. The mentality is very, very different. So one of the things they don't tell you in TAP, amongst the many other things they don't tell um, people that thought this is kind of all they've ever done, is the different casts of characters
Mhm.
that are out there in the different you know uh, what do you call it, environments or ecosystems that are
Mhm.
out there. So they don't tell you, well, this is what a business development guy does, and this is what a VP does, and this is what your program manager that works at, name a big prime does. And none of that is explained, and you're doing recon by fire. And so it's different. And the same thing in business, hey, this is what the chief growth officer does, or this is what the CFO does. And you see a lot of guys, hey, I'm going to be a vice president of something. And I'm like, okay, but man, this company here, they make metal parts for name a thing, and it's not very exciting work. So, but it's a very specific product line. And, so there's a lot of things that we miss. So that's back to options. What options do you have when you transition? Or what options do you have as a young lieutenant? Well, you got a lot of options. Or as a captain, or as, even a major, there's many paths, uh, but only certain ones lead higher up the stairs. Uh, so, or as a lieutenant colonel, there are many roads, and some of them are off roads, and then some of them are up roads. And obviously, um, being as blessed as I was, I was able to, I came into as the military as an E nothing. So to be able to retire, and lead people at the colonel level was every day I was in bonus round. Every day it was just like I'd hit a pinball machine and I'd got another pinball for those analog people. And I knew that. And if you have that attitude, you will go far. So I tell people that too. But people ask me, do I miss being in uniform? No, not real. I don't miss, because the time to go is when people are still clapping. The time to walk off stage is when everybody's still clapping. The time to go is when people want you to stay. So that's sort of an old adage, but you will leave with a sense of fulfillment that you can't get anywhere else. So, and now every day's in bonus, and then certainly you get a double bonus when you get somebody that says, "Hey, can you help me solve this problem?" You go, "Okay, well, great." Especially if they're monetizing it. So, and then you stress a little bit about it, and you have some anxiety, but um, all that is good too. So, yeah.
Wow. So, do you have any? I know you've talked about a lot of skills and kind of perspectives, approaches to take for success at different stages in your career journey. What do you think our society or kind of the next generation, thinking broadly, is lacking in terms of being positioned to succeed in this field of defense or national security?
Well, so there's two sides to that question. So um, our society, and we're already seeing, is going to have a great demand for for tradespeople,
Mhm.
people that actually know how to put things together and build things and weld pieces of metal together and to work with their hands. So that being said, now if you can take that skill set and you put somebody that has a a pretty broad perspective on reading and all that, and you add a little bit of really good intellectual capital to that, then you've really got something there. So that's important. But the world is connected now, more so than ever before and faster than ever before. So not only being able to identify, synthesize, understand, um, something from somewhere else. Um, it's being able to do something with it. That's hugely important. So, it's I think you got to have a foot sort of in both doors, being able to have some level of creativity, whether that's building something or making something, and then having some intellectual chops behind it. And wow, if we can get that kind of folks in our defense industrial base, um, I live pretty close to Huntsville, and the birthplace of where all the rocket people live, and there's some incredible builders in the space community that like building things, and then they have this huge um, engineering and intellectual tailwind behind them. So they're able to be really, really creative. And that's what when we were talking about the dawn of the space industry, that's what those guys had. They were not only really, really, really smart and well educated and good engineers, they could build it. I mean, they could sit down and they weren't using CAD to draw this stuff out. They were, using a slide rule. So they were, building this on paper. So that's hugely interesting. And I think as now space is a domain, that's hugely important. Then there's cyber, and that's going to take some very specific practitioners to stay ahead of that, or at least to get into it. So there's a very scientific end of it. And then there's also the operator that's back there that's going, what is the enemy doing? And how do we counter this threat? And how often do we counter it? And so they're in this chain. So there's an operator in there, and then there's a very science, a very program focused young individual looking at that, usually a young individual. So I just say that's sort of both. But on the military side, you're operating in the most complex environment possible. And just like I tell my son, the most dangerous weapon in our house is not a shotgun. It is the cell phone. And, you know, um, how that's, how young people are handling that is something I'm glad I didn't have to contend with. Social media and our ability to communicate, and seeing, you know, these army apps that mold in the barracks, make social media in minutes now. So being aware of all that, and they're growing up in this generation of the young leaders out there, but you have to be able to act on it. You have to be able to respond to it. You can't just go, oh, there's a problem. What button do I have to hit for a solution? That's back to being transactional. So you're going to have to lead through this social media, narrative intelligence environment that is so thick and fraught with peril. Space, cyber domain now into multi-domain. I grew up as a land. Okay, they do that on water. Air, okay, the Air Force guys are taking care of that. we didn't know what counter unmanned aerial systems activities were, and just how, that I wasn't thinking about that. That was somebody else's thing, and to be able to manage those communications. So yeah, being able to do those things, and you're gonna have to get it pretty early in. So yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic, about our young generation of fighters, as long as they're enabled to train and hone their craft. So, I understand, budgets are, we've had to let the yard man go at Fort wherever, and soldiers are going to have to, step up and be the yard service for. That's okay. That's fine. That's part of it. But we can't pull those things, away from activities that we got to, that lethality thing. I know I'll come back to that, and I know it's the buzzword now, but I believe that as a parent of a young 11 Bravo, that, when he comes back, said, well, we spent days on the range. I'm like, hey, great, awesome. Because it's a killing and dying business. So lethality is really kind of the coin of the realm there, and being able to drag that equipment out of the motor pool and let it and break it sometimes, understand that, and not become I'm going to lead from behind this computer. But I'm pretty confident, in that. So that's the challenge, is this social media environment, this, so the whole business now, and it's only gonna compound a bit, as we're able to pull more of this more quickly, and things, it's it's exciting in one sense, but it's very troubling. There's some things that keep me up at night, and that's probably one of them, is our ability to manage that and the fact that there's still nuclear weapons in the world, and we blow past, we run past that a lot here lately. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Nuclear weapons in the Soviet Union were a real thing. Nuclear war was a real thing, and we think a lot about this country going to war with this country, or that country going. At the end of the day, that country has nuclear weapons, so you have to temper all of these. What if we go to war with? So I was like, whoa, slow down a little bit. Let's just slow down, just a little bit, before we go talking about that, because that's a reality that this generation has not had to contend with in the way that, and really my parents in the 50s and 60s, of course, they were getting under their, whatever their desk was in rural Mississippi.
Yeah, well, I remember fallout shelters. We still had them up in Northeast Mississippi.
Yeah.
Still had fallout shelters, and it was an ever present thing on kind of my forefathers' minds. But yeah, you make a great point about the consequences of going to war in that situation. It's a little more than just a skirmish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking forward, as you kind of think about the near future that we've got here, are there any developments that you're really hopeful about in terms of the future of defense? Anything that stands out, that kind of that you're hopeful for, or kind of inspired by?
Yeah. So I hope we can get this tactical power thing right. That we can power these systems, that these advances that we're making in communications technologies and that sort of thing. So that we got to be able to power it. Probably the next thing is getting our defense industrial base into a point where we can produce what the nation requires, without making it really complicated. So, because it's complicated business anyway. I mean, logistics doesn't suffer amateurs, and really that's strategic readiness, that man, train, equip. So strategic, that's really what it is. And I don't like using the term readiness, but and the ability to recruit young people into the armed forces. So I think we have to build a military that is worthy of our nation's best. And that means the young people that are graduating in the top of their class out of school, besides the crew that we're recruiting for the service academies, the military needs to think about those young people as well. So I think you always try to go after the best young person that you can, because we have to have a service worthy of the best. And that's part of everybody, from old guys like me who, if I drive by the National Guard Armory somewhere and the grass ain't cut, I don't want to be that old guy that calls somebody and raises hell because the grass is not cut. But I may be that guy that calls him and says, "Why is the grass not cut? This place is an embassy. The flag goes up and the grass gets cut." I've been on the other end of that conversation before. I was a young officer, but it really is an embassy. So, if we're outside the Army recruiting station and, the recruiter's standing out there smoking cigarettes outside the front of the recruiting station, that doesn't, we're supposed to be the health and, we're supposed to be the healthiest people in America. So, it doesn't, put us in our best light. So, that's very concerning to me. Because, I want specialists more to have, really good other specialists and privates around him, because we want the best. And it is, and I say this about the Guard in particular. I think the National Guard is the premier leader development organization in pick a state. I think that, and I've seen this. I've seen somebody, near and dear to you is a great example of this. That the best young officers should be the best people, the most qualified, the best leaders in our community. So we should be the premier leader development organization, period. All this, I'm going to go participate in Leader 21 here, or whatever this is in the state. There was a day when, the mayor was in the National Guard, and, name a position,
Yep.
the bankers, the whatever. But really that's how it should be. I mean, that's the way, if I were, in charge for a day, that I would certainly sell it as a premier leader development organization. And then the other part of it is the quality of our training attracts and retains quality soldiers. So soldiers who aren't the best soldiers are the ones that generally don't like doing soldier stuff. They like pursuing nefarious activities. But our best soldiers get really excited when say, "Hey, we're going to go do an airborne operation into some island somewhere." They're like, "Whoa, that sounds really cool. Well, we're going to we're going to go, we're going to go to Europe and do some really cool things, or we're going to go do this or that or wherever." Quality training, and that's exercises. That's our combat training center is the best in the world. May not be the most pleasant experience you'll ever have, but it will be one of the most transformational experiences you will have outside of real live, no kidding, real combat, which is can be a very transformational experience, maybe not in a very good way. So, but anyway, and then we do some, do some deployments here and B there. But I think that is where we's at, and that's part of, um, peace and strength, and backing that up with flexing that big training muscle, and I just I think that's really the two things there. But I'm more optimistic most days than pessimistic. But there's just a lot of things that have to be right, and they have to be right at the right times, all the way from, what our leaders in Congress are doing uh, to fund the military with some level of predictability, not CR to CR to CR, which uh, just causes an incredible amount of turbulence from the planning and programming, which is I don't want to say it's a fairly complex system that we're kind of welded to. But everybody has a role, from the congressional role all the way down to private private so and so. And that's that's part of even what I do, and it's non-monetized, about being concerned if somebody's smoking outside the recruitment office.
I love your emphasis on them being embassies. I never thought of it that way, and you're spot on.
A guard readiness center, a guard readiness center in small town, wherever it's at, is an embassy. And the flag goes up, the grass is cut, and nobody's standing out front out there smoking. And the equipment is clean. The fence doesn't have holes in it. Regardless of wherever it's at, it looks the part, because young people that come into this business want order. 100% to nothing, order and structure, and it's not a bad thing. There's nothing bad to it. Nobody's yelling at anybody. Well, maybe, but the order and structure and how we look externally is super, super important, because he or she that does the small things well is he or she that generally does the big things pretty well. So it's a kind of coded thing, just an attribute.
Yeah, the whole picture there. Well, thank you so much, Scottie, for sharing your insights and experiences. Your contribution to the world of defense and national security, you made a real difference. And I learned a lot today. I loved hearing kind of the full journey of Scottie Moore.
No, Hannah, that's just very superficial. Okay. That's just kind of the top lines, but I do enjoy, because I can never, I have a kind of a bill with, the institution that I could never repay, in terms of what it's allowed me to do, or still allows me to do. So that's, and just being able to have a conversation has been great. And I enjoy your work with what you're doing out there to contribute to national security, because it's important. It's a part of the defense industrial bases that we've got to have. I don't want to say outside thinkers, but we've got to have people thinking about military problems, and not just being so transactional about it. You're thinking deeper than that in your work. So I always enjoy our collaboration. That's the other word, is collaboration. That's the other part of this. I don't want to say network, because network's not a great word, but is that those collaborative efforts. So
Yeah. That's great. Well, it's our future and it's our nation. So we gotta get engaged.
got to do something.
Do something. Well, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears. I hope the conversation sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think about our future. So don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.